We help corporations pretty much get ready for the next 10 years, right? Make sure that their software is ready, that their teams are ready for the future that's coming in.
In this episode, we meet Dr. Liria Litano, a transformation specialist and educator who has applied her expertise to revolutionize the tech and retail industries. You come in and you basically say, oh, this is what you really need, or how can we tweak this to work better?
Right. Usually companies have bought software, but all roads lead to Excel. So then they come to us and they're like, surely there has to be a better way, right? Mm-hmm. We have a team of 20 people running these reports. It's taking us all day. And here I come being like, yeah, this should take you like a day. This team of 10 should be one person.
You're also an adjunct professor and you're teaching business courses yourself.
Yeah. Here I am teaching, at 2 universities. Keep dreaming. Don't let anyone tell you that it's not possible, because everything is possible. You're in the US. I am the American dream.
Breaking barriers in any field takes strength, determination, and vision. I'm Alex Ponce. In this episode, we meet Dr. Liria Litano, a transformation specialist and educator who has applied her expertise to revolutionize the tech and retail industries. From navigating adversity to giving back as a business professor, Dr. Litano embodies resilience, dedication, and inspiring the next generation to rise and thrive. Well, Dr. Liria Litano, thank you for joining us on The Pulse. How are you feeling?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
This is exciting.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this all week.
All week?
Yeah.
Well, you are one of my favorite people on earth. And so it'll be fun to see you in this professional setting. So you are a retail industry expert with quite a bit of experience. So before we get there, I want to just briefly, like a glancing blow, where you are now and what your role is.
So currently I work as a transformation advisor at a solution provider company called Blue Yonder. So what we do is we help corporations pretty much get ready for the next 10 years, right? Make sure that their software is ready, that their teams are ready for the future that's coming in, right? The technology aspect, and making sure that there's no gaps or leakage, value leakage in their current business.
What kind of solutions are these? This is software for like inventory?
Yeah, there's supply chain inventory for the retail world, right? Mm-hmm. So stores, very back of the house, where your merchandise is. It sounds so like, why wouldn't you know where your merchandise is? But there's many places where your inventory could be. It could be in a stock room. It could be in the garbage. It could be in a trailer, and trying to understand how that lines up to when you need it to sell. That's what we focus on.
And that's where you come in and you basically say, oh, this is what you really need, or how can we tweak this to work better? Because you say transformation, and it implies something's changing.
Right. Usually companies have used, for lack of a better word, Excel. $1 billion companies, they've used this software for like 10 years, right? 10, 15 years.
Right.
And they've bought software, but all roads lead to Excel. So then they come to us and they're like, surely there has to be a better way, right? Mm-hmm. We have a team of 20 people running these reports. It's taking us all day. And here I come being like, yeah, this should take you like a day. This team of 10 should be one person, that's critical thinking, doing the job day in and day out. So I'm looking at all aspects of the business, from the front end, right? Like how the stores look, to the back end, how the inventory is supposed to, the shelving is supposed to look like, and making sure that it's all like a circle. Right. Everything is flowing in place.
And integrated.
Of course.
All right. So your experience talking to them comes from a place of you having been them, you being the customer. Yeah. So let's go back to the very beginning. And by the very beginning, I believe that it was at a retail store.
Oh my gosh.
I went way back.
Yeah, super back. So I had the pleasure during college to not have money. And so I had to work full-time jobs.
Okay.
So I worked 2 full-time jobs and I went to school here at FIU.
Okay.
But my first job was at Bed Bath & Beyond. Now it doesn't exist, but back then it was a home goods kind of place, and I was a cashier.
Mhm.
So when people tell me like, oh, are you an industry expert? I'm like, I could tell you that I'm a frustrated end user. I'm an expert in being a frustrated end user.
Okay.
I've been in all parts, right? So as a cashier, like I rung up the merchandise. I had to like, if the merchandise was damaged, I had to throw it away. So I understood like the operation aspect of running a retail store.
And you dealt with customers.
Of course, I had to deal with customers on, selling them the merchandise, but also on the frustration of them coming in with like broken items or unhappy. My sheet shrunk. I don't know how to cook. My iron's broken. So like all of a sudden, like I knew how to like deal with the aspect of the personality of a frustrated customer with no knowledge. I didn't go to school knowing this information, right? So I'm learning it. And then like years later, I'm learning what it means in the workplace.
So here's a customer. You're trying to help them within the context of what you know you can do. And then you have these systems that are driving you nuts.
Of course. So like your system is telling you, yeah, you can return it. You can offer them a 50% discount, or you can offer a new product. It says we have 5 on hand. Okay, like let's call someone like, hey, can you bring me? The customer wants the same exact thing. Like bring it to the front. We don't have it. What do you mean you don't have it? We have 5 on hand. Oh, like we can't find it. So at that, as young as that was, I was like, we just lost 5 items. Like how? Where are they? I mean, in home goods, it's like comforters. So it's not like it's easy to lose these items, right? So like, where is this merchandise? So,
I lost the mattress.
right. Like where
did it
where
go?
could it possibly be? I'm like, okay, like I didn't understand, what that meant, but I knew I was like frustrated because here I am telling the customer, surely we can fill your order. There's 5 on hand. Oh, there isn't. So what do we do? Let's call another store. It seems so crazy like now because we have solution software in place. But back then you had to call a store, pick up the phone, talk to someone. Hey, it says you have 10 on hand. Do you have it?
You spoke to another human?
Another human on another phone
What
on
is
a landline. And they'd say, yeah, we have it. Okay, either the customer is going to go to pick it up there or they would have to transfer it to us, which was like 2 weeks later. So just the process itself, it was very manual, right? But I didn't know any better. Like, that's the way things were. That's the way it was taught to me. And it wasn't until much as I grew in my career, I went from being front end, first line of defense to corporate management of buying and planning the stores. That's when I was like, I knew that something was wrong then.
Well, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. So while you were at this retail store, you were also working towards your bachelor's in business?
Yeah, international business.
International business. Okay. So you were already thinking globally before it was even fashionable. Okay.
I wanted to get out.
You wanted to
travel the world.
Oh, so you wanted to leave. All right. So you're now transitioning. You worked there for a few years and you're transitioning and you want to go somewhere else. Where did you end up going?
When I graduated, I knew like I wanted to have a corporate type job. That's why I had gotten my 4-year education. So I went to a career fair at FIU and I applied everywhere, anything I could just see, like anywhere from like Target, Macy's. I applied at the banks. I applied with foreign service, anything international related, I was there.
So we could have lost you to the Department of State.
You could have, it would have been a completely different life for me. But Macy's called me and I wasn't interested in working at the stores. So originally I was like, no, thanks. And they explained to me that they had a college program for corporate Macy's. So you would eventually become an assistant buyer or a planner. So instead of me working in the store, I was planning what merchandise went into the store.
So corporate work.
Corporate work, like 6 months out, right? Like what is the store going to look like a year from now? What merchandise will you buy? Down to the size, down to the color, to the location. Hey, it's colder in one place versus another. So we're going to bring that in, understanding the supply chain of it. And the pay wasn't great, but they made a point to say that, like, if you stay with us the 4 years, work up, from an assistant to an associate to a planner, you'll eventually double your salary. And I thought at that time, I couldn't really travel. I was only a resident of the US, so I couldn't really move around. I thought this was the best way. It was in Florida. I was downtown Miami. So I took that position. And
now this was through one of their acquisitions, which is Burdines.
Burdines had just been acquired by Macy's.
Okay.
So by the time I joined, it was considered Macy's.
Okay.
They had just finished the acquisition. And I did that for about 4 years.
Okay.
And then Macy's once again did a merger. And instead of having different corporate offices throughout the United States, they decided to just have one.
Centralized.
New York, right.
Okay. Was it at Herald Square?
A Herald Square in New York.
Mm-hmm.
So they offered me the position. They're like, either you can take a severance package, or take a severance package. We're going to have 10 planners left in Florida out of 80, right? Like out of the staff of 200 people, 20 would be left.
Okay.
Or you can go to New York and see if we can find a place for you there.
Oh, that sounds like the better option.
Right. And at the time, mind you, it was the recession had just hit. The bubble had burst for real estate. So
we're talking what, 2008?
Yeah, 2008. Times were tough. I looked at my situation. I thought maybe I'll open up a business. And then I'm like, let's go with safety.
Right.
So I went to New York.
Well, you were still young.
I was young. I didn't have kids. It was just me.
Right.
But I never left home. I'm Hispanic. So I lived at home. You don't leave your home until you're married.
Right.
And my parents were the first to be like, you're going to New York. Go ahead. And I don't know how I did it, but I booked a one-way trip. I found a place. Yeah.
A little backpack.
I did a couple of round trips, and I'm like, okay, I found a place. I'm going to live here. My parents never saw the apartment. It was just me looking through New York. I hadn't really been familiar with New York. I knew, obviously, where the State of Liberty, the Statue of Liberty is, where Herald Square is, but I didn't know New York. I found a place and I moved.
Where was it?
It was in the Upper East Side. It was really pretty. It's 5 blocks from the park, from the Met. It was gorgeous. I mean, a miracle, right? That's what I picked.
So every time you watch a movie, you think,
oh my gosh, it brings me back.
Okay.
So I did that for about 2 years. We finished the
2 years in New York.
2 years in New York.
Crash course.
Yeah. Oh, it was complete crash course.
Okay.
I'd never left Florida prior to that. So it was my
So you went from a wide-eyed college student working at a retail store. Now here you are going for your Emily in Paris moment, going all the way to New York, freshly graduated, freshly minted, just within a few years.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're in New York, living in your first place, having your first corporate gig in an actual headquarters situation. So it's more so than just a local, office building. Now it's the headquarters, Macy's.
Yeah.
What was your experience at Macy's?
It was very interesting and chaotic all at once. Understand that because you're going through a merger, right? Mm-hmm. They went from having 5 different softwares to having one, right? So Florida used a specific software. Mm-hmm. California used a different one. So why
were there different software?
Everyone could choose. It was independent before, so everyone could choose their own. And now they come in all at once and boom, make it work. And there was little time. It's not like we had a year to figure this out. It was okay, in 3 months, we have to buy everything for the next year. Basically, we were in a room. We didn't even have desks. They weren't it was happening so fast. We didn't even have desks. So we were in a makeshift cafeteria with a water cooler that ran out of water.
Again, this is the centralized headquarters of Macy's.
Goes to show you.
And it was like a startup.
I felt like such a startup.
Did you have like chairs made out of like pizza boxes? Like, what's going on?
It was just like simple chairs. I think we were able to get laptops. No, we didn't even have laptops. It was like literally like it was like makeshift.
You see, you tell me Macy's headquarters. I'm imagining like Meryl Streep screaming at Anne Hathaway, and and what you're telling me is it was the opposite.
It was very like it. To your point of the startup, the first year we were there, they said, we're pretty much lifting bonuses. Like, as long as you make the plan, we will, you will have bonus. Of course, there were no rules in place either. They were like, just make the forecast, just make your sales plan, do whatever it takes, So you got to really use that brain of yours, and me and the buyer at the time, like I was a planner, she was a buyer. We really thought outside the box and we blew away the sales plan. Like we maxed it, which was incredible, right? Like I love that experience of Macy's. By the second year, obviously rules came in like, hey, we want to make sure that you're using the systems or that you're doing different things.
So it's stifling your innovation.
It's stifling. And so like, of course, the second year, not just mine, but everyone's.
Right.
Oh, like the sales dropped. Like, right.
Well, that also affects the bonuses.
Right. Like, so like everything. So it was lovely in the sense that like, it was like a startup mentality, do what you want. And then like, of course, there's rules and regulations afterwards.
Right.
It was chaotic because there's a lot of emotions going on. You're learning, you're running. It's crazy, but it's like this amazing once in a lifetime experience. When people tell me like, oh, do you want to work for a startup again? I always think of that, right? Like, do I want that again in my life? Because it was very crazy. And then from a personal point of view, I thought like I would move to New York and it was going to be a melting pot, just like it is in South Florida.
Okay.
I came to find out that I was the only Hispanic in the women's area.
Okay.
Which was, I didn't think it was a big deal, but apparently it was. Like for either people thought that I was Hispanic or they thought I was Italian. So it was very like odd to come from a place of like South Florida where everything's very Hispanic, very.
But was this a Macy's thing or was this a New York thing?
Both. Like
it was just culturally like
right,
throughout
like,
the entire
the company
city.
Didn't have a lot of Hispanic. That's fine. But even like in the Upper East Side, it was very one link. There was not a lot of Hispanic people. And I remember getting into a cab with like a bunch of friends and the cab driver asked us like what we were doing. I think we were in the Lower East Side. What we were doing in the Lower East Side, we should have been in Queens because we're Hispanic and that's where all the music is. Like it didn't go with what we were doing, but I just found that odd that like even the cab driver telling us like, you guys are in the wrong place. I'm like,
but I love that comment. You have to go to this other area. That's where the music is.
Yeah, that's where the music is. If you guys want to have a good time, you want to dance, we just wanted to go to a bar. Like,
okay, I don't know who this cab driver is, but I got to meet him. He sounds pretty interesting. Okay, so you're working there. What was leadership like?
Leadership was, it was tough in the sense that they were trying to also figure out the rules and like the people management of it.
But I don't understand. They've been around for over 100 years.
Yeah, but you still have new people. You have new solutions in place. So are you
telling me like everybody was new?
Everyone came from everywhere. So I was from Florida. My counterpart was from Georgia. Like there was not everyone came from, and everyone had different rules how they used to plan their system.
So when the restructuring occurred, they just slammed everyone together?
Together, right.
So what happened to the previous management, the previous leadership?
They could have been moved to another area.
Oh, so everything just shifted.
It just shifted. So now you're dealing with new groups.
Chaos.
Okay, you're dealing with new groups, people that are very talented, right? You're dealing with new management. And then on top of everything, you're dealing with new software. So you're telling people that have had 30, 20 years of experience, within their core, they know how to plan, they know how to merchandise, they know the colors that are going to work. And you're telling them, listen, that's all wonderful, but what does the system say? Right? And it's frustrating because you have people that may not be tech savvy.
Right.
So in their hearts, they know how to do it, but they can't click all of the buttons to get that answer. So there was a lot of frustration, a lot of tension. And on top of that, the end result is that we have to make our sales. So I can understand being frustrated. Now that, I take a look back, I'm like, I can understand how frustrating it was even for the managers. We always blame management. Oh my God, managers, they suck. But I understand their frustration because they're dealing with an entire new team, complete from different places, all kinds of different tech savvy. And then here's, by the way, a new solution. Go.
All right. So your experience, would you say overall it was good, it was bad, or other?
No, it was very good. When I was living in it, I thought it was bad. Like, I thought it was a very volatile, chaotic environment. I thought, this isn't for me. Do I even want retail? The glamour. Yes, you get Fashion Week, but once outside of that glamour, it was very painful.
How so?
Weekends, working a lot of hours. Like, I lived in New York, but I never saw New York.
What do you mean?
I didn't see New York. I would work till 6, 7 p.m. You go out, get something to eat, rinse and repeat. Right. It is lonely. I mean, you have friends at work, but that's it. Your work is your friendship.
Right.
So like you leave, you're exhausted. On the weekends, you want to go out, but you're exhausted. You're like, if I don't get these 2 days to sleep in, then Monday through Friday, it's literally, I have to be there around 8 a.m. and I have to leave work around 8 o'clock at night. So it was very draining. But looking back on it, like, as bad as that was, it really enticed me into where I am now. And it made me realize, like, that's a learning point. Like, I couldn't really talk about what my emotions were. I couldn't define them. Now looking back, I know what that was. But I know that had I not had that, I wouldn't be where I am. Because it opened so many doors for me.
Well, they say that working at Macy's prepares you for pretty much any job in the retail world, corporate-wise, because it's a crucible. It'll burn away all the bad habits you have, maybe give you a few new ones, but one way or the other, you are going to learn to do things a certain way, and it becomes an asset.
Yeah.
So much so that at some point you were offered a position in Tecsys.
Yeah. So after being in New York for like about 2 years, again, I didn't know if it was, I didn't like the job. I didn't like the people. I didn't like me.
You couldn't figure it out.
I couldn't figure it out. I only had a bachelor's. I didn't need more than that. I was making decent money at the time. It was $80,000. It's not, right now it may not seem like a lot, but 2008, it was a pretty number. But I didn't know what it was. And I thought, you know what, I'll just leave the industry. And then I applied, literally went online, and I was just like, any job, I don't care. Move to California, I don't care. Tecsys called me and they're like, why don't you come down here? Let us show you what we do. Small company. So I wasn't even thinking of, the grandeur of Macy's and then a little small company.
What did they do?
They are kind of like Macy's, but they have they sell to Midwest America, income of like a family of 4 making $50,000 with one breadwinner.
Okay. So that's the typical demographic.
So it's like JCPenney type lower.
Okay.
And I went there, it was in Houston. I spent the day there. And they're like, we know where you're Macy's, you're in New York, you're fashion. I think at the time I was managing like $85 million. We're small. You'd be doing intimate apparel. It's $3 million business. We'll pay you more money.
Your previous budget was probably more than the whole company.
Right. They're like, we'll pay you more money. Would you be interested in coming? And I'm like, well, what do you guys work? At that point I was like, I'm honestly considering leaving the industry. They're like, why don't you give it a chance? Maybe it's not the industry. You have all this talent. What if it's not the industry? What if it's a life that you need? They're like, she sold it really well. It was an old, elderly HR lady. And she was like, we only work 8 to 5. And at 5 o'clock, like, we're out. I was like, okay. It was during Christmas time. There was the cross, the Holy Cross everywhere. People were saying like, Merry Christmas. I'm not used to this. And I'm like, you know what? They drove me around Texas, Houston. I'm like, I need a change. I need a change of pace. I'm tired of the winter coat too. All right. And I took it. Like they were paying, I think, $15,000 more than what I was making in New York, but with Tecsys lifestyle. Right. So like everything was like so much cheaper in that sense. So I was like, everyone in New York was like, are you nuts? Like Tecsys? Like, why? I'm like, I need a change. I don't know if it's the industry or if it's me, you know?
So again, more compensation, less cost of living, change of pace, smaller, more manageable company.
Yeah.
And apparently very culturally friendly.
Yeah. And it really was.
Because the stories that you've given of Macy's seem to be a little more combative.
Yeah, it was startup mentality, right?
Yeah.
Like you're dealing with strangers.
A whole bunch of paint fish in one thing.
Right. And, you're both trying to come up to something together, but you're being pinned up against each other. Either there's too much inventory or there's not enough. Like there's always something. And it always felt like management was trying to pin you against your counterpart instead of just working together. But I think that was just
the perception.
It was the perception. The reality is because so many things were happening, it created that. So in Houston, I mean, they were dealing with Excel, but it was so nice. Like I walked in and they're like at 5 o'clock. I'm here working at 5 o'clock and they're like, we gotta go. I'm like, where are we going? It's like, no, you go home. It's time to go. It was like mass exodus at 5 o'clock. Like it. All of a sudden, I had time that I never had before, and so I was able to realize it wasn't the industry that was the problem. It was perhaps the company and me. I did not fit in that company anymore. Whereas in Tecsys, I fit right in.
So you accept the reality that it's not that you fit or don't fit with a company. It's that perhaps you don't fit with it anymore. Right. People change, companies change.
Companies change, managers change, relationships change, and it's part of growing up. At that time, it made sense. I had an amazing time when I was here at Macy's in Florida. It was wonderful. In New York, I had a great time, but I knew that that there had to be something more because why would I feel the way I feel? I was always drained. I was always in a bad mood.
And yet in Tecsys, you felt
overnight. It was like happy-go-lucky. Like I sometimes would be like, I don't understand.
Suspicious of it?
Yeah, like they're like, oh, it's Friday fish fry. I'm like,
we're gonna do a corporate thing,
right? Like I remember wanting to bring, and they're like, no, we make everything. I'm like, I don't know how to cook. I'll just cater. Like I'll just cater something for my assistant. They're like, no, you have to learn to cook. We'll give you they gave me a recipe book. I'm like, oh, okay. And everyone had potlucks. And it was just a very friendly environment.
So they were big on the I of DEI. They were big on inclusivity.
It was.
So, and this was an abrupt change from your experience in New York. And don't get me wrong, the way you describe Macy's is the way most people describe New York. Like it's
it's do or die,
it's
cold.
Do or die, cold. Like it's where you make your bones on the way somewhere.
Yeah, I wish I would have. And I've had friends that have stayed in New York and it just wasn't for me, and I remember I had a manager call me and he told me, he's like, he was from Florida. He had moved up to New York. And he's like, sometimes it's just not maybe you're just not, either you didn't cut it or it's just not meant to be, and now that I look back, I was like, or I could have just outgrown the company.
That's usually what happens.
Right.
You outgrew them and you're in a different place.
It took me like 15 years to learn that, obviously. Wow. But at the time, I was like devastated to hear that. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't cut it out. And now I look back, I was like, no, I just outgrew it. Like I needed to do that. I needed to move on to something else. If not, I wouldn't be able to use it as a stepping stone elsewhere.
Well, hindsight's 20/20 to be fair.
Right. But at the time, it was a risk and I did it.
Well, talking about risks, you spent some time there.
Yeah.
Until you were, for all intents and purposes, recalled back to Miami.
Yeah.
To personal reasons.
About a year and a half. I was perfectly fine in Tecsys. I would have stayed there.
Living your best life.
Living my best life. Oh my God.
Jogging every day.
It was great. The weekends were great. I had an apartment big enough for my family to come. They were here every other month. It was just wonderful. But my grandfather got sick and my mom's like, if I'm going to go overseas and take care of him, I need help here. Mm-hmm. So I was like, let me make some calls and see it, if I can find a job back in Miami. I didn't think Miami was going to be possible because that's why I left. Jobs were very few.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thankfully I was able to, I called a friend and who worked at Perry Ellis International with a wholesale company. Men's pants, men's dresswear.
The fashion brand.
The fashion brand. And they were out of Miami, Doral. And I made a call and he's like, we have a position, come interview. I interviewed. They loved me. I'm like, perfect. I just need a job. Like at that point, it wasn't like, is this the right fit? It was more of like, I needed to come back home with the expectation that like within a year, I'd be out.
Compensation?
Compensation was fine. It was something different. So instead of now thinking as a retailer, now they were paying me to deal with wholesale, but as a retailer. Like they had a hard time understanding how retailers think. So instead of me doing grunt work, it was more of like, tell us what we need to entice a retailer, right? A buyer, a planner. Like, what is it that they look for in their product? And what is it that they look for in the price so that we can get these items sold?
Now, at this point, you're still an individual contributor.
I was an individual.
You were part of teams, but you were really...
Right.
Okay.
Once I moved to Perry Ellis, I did have, even though I was an individual contributor, as you say, the brand, I guess, for the brand that I was a part of had a team of like 20 designers. So it was like a team of 20. And basically it's like, listen, you're individual. Yeah. But if this doesn't work out, we would lay these people off, right? Like this brand would die and therefore these people would no longer.
So you indirectly had a lot of control.
Right. So yeah, I'm individual. Like it's just me, right? Like working. But there's this gut because there's people that are depending on this brand to come back, right? And or be sold somewhere else, either expand the line or keep the brand alive. But there are people on the line. So it's the first time that it dawns on me that my job affects other people, right? Before I always thought myself like an individual contributor. Oh, I just do my job and get out. Now I'm like, or I do my job and then the customer will eventually buy my product.
Sure.
But now I'm like, if I don't do my job correctly, people will lose their jobs, right? So that's a little different. And I did grow in the position to the fact that I had like a team of like 4 or 5 people reporting under me. But again, it was very like more from the strategic point of view, managing like a wholesale account, managing customers. So instead of my customer is not the end user, my customer are the Targets of the world, the Walmarts of the world, right? The Macy's of the world. They bought my product. So those were my customers. That was fun because now instead of like just dealing with one, I'm dealing with a lot of like different accounts.
Well, you started as an individual contributor, but eventually you were part of a team. What was your leadership style with them?
I always think that my leadership style comes down to the person. So I can't say that I'm a macro or I'm a micromanager. I always determine on what the person needs.
Okay.
So if I'm dealing with someone fresh from college, yeah, I'm going to have to be a micromanager, right? I'm going to have to break out the task over, one task might be 10 different steps. I'm going to be asking that at each step, they come and show it to me, right? To make sure it's right before they move on.
Sure.
Micromanagement. Where I've had others where this is their second, third job or their third position. They're, moving around. They're doing rotationals. With that, I'm more macro. Like, here is the task. Go get it done. Like use your knowledge, use what you have in your capability and show me how you can get it done. That's how I consider macro because I'm trying to make sure that they can critical think on their own, right? Like if they were faced with this problem and there was no one around, will they be able to solve it? So it's different people, different places, different times, right? So that's how my management style flexes depending on the person.
Well, your time at Perry Ellis wasn't all roses. You had your conflicts, like anybody in your position. And at some point, the relationship ended. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
At the time, new management came in. So back to the, is it me? Is it them? New management came in. a strategic partner. They were trying to, I honestly don't know what they were trying to do, because 3 years later, they also left the company. So whatever they were trying to do, whatever strategic transformation roadmap they were entitled to do, it failed on them. But nevertheless, they came in and they started to go into my business that had been running pretty well. And they started to tear it apart, like, oh, we're going to take care of this. And then they wouldn't take care of it, and then the business would die. So I had accounts where...
And here you are worrying about not letting accounts die. So
Right.
people don't lose their jobs.
Right. Like I had an account that literally, as long as you saw the customer twice a year, you showed them the product, they would buy it. Easy peasy, so easy. And, I let my manager know, hey, it's that time for me to travel with the salesperson to go and show the numbers and show the product. They go hand in hand. You can't just show the product.
Right.
You have to show the product and then show the math behind it. Here's the value. Here's how much money it's going to give you. I can do both, but I would stay to the value part. My counterpart would stay to the product. My boss was like, no need for you to go. We'll get to them eventually. I'm like, no, we have to go. I don't care if I don't go, but you're going to have to go, because these people place significantly ahead of time. Don't worry about it. When he finally got to go with the salesperson, by then they had moved on and they went with private label. We never showed them any products. So that was like, there's $2 million we're never going to get back. It was like the easiest $2 million, and it's gone, right? All because they just decided on this relation, like changing the relationship.
Almost like on a whim.
Right. Like, I'm like, okay, don't let me travel. Fine. But don't lose that relationship with the customer. But that's, they thought like by cutting costs or whatever, that would be a one way to do it. It didn't work. So little by little, I'm like, you're ruining this beauty that I've created. Right. I have people that are depending on staying, and here you are every time, like, destroying it, This
beautiful thing, you this mandala that you've created with your experience from Macy's and Tecsys,
and finally, they were like, oh, it was funny. One day I came to work and they're like, we've decided your position is no longer needed. We're gonna go ahead and streamline it. I'm like, okay. Again, you don't have any software, so I don't know how you're gonna streamline it, but sure, do it. And
that was what they told you,
right,
and how you responded, and you're analyzing it. But how did that make you feel personally?
Oh, it broke me, because I had given at the time 6 years to the company, right? And obviously, I loved what I was doing, and I became too connected, too passionate about it. I was very passionate, even though I was a type of an individual contributor. It affected me. It was my baby. I had created it. I had created it from nothing. I kept it alive 6 years. I was told, hey, this brand is going away in a year. 6 years in, it was still there, like, still strong. I'm like, well, I did that. Like, I had just gotten an award, I think, the year prior. So, like, yeah, of course it affects you, like, personally. Like, what did I do? Now I know that it wasn't me, and it was more of like mismanagement.
Right.
But again, when I talk about like not understanding, not being able to verbalize what's going on at work, thankfully, right towards that end, I had started my MBA. And with my approval of my manager at the time, everyone was, yay. So I started to realize what was going on before it was happening, because I'm like, hey, I learned about this in class, I learned about these strategic reductions that they do in the workforce, and I would talk to my counterparts and I'm like, Liria, there's something going down, like you're probably going to lose your job. So it wasn't like I was surprised, because I finally had an education to explain to me, hey,
this is what
happens to 80% of companies. Like, this could be you. And I'm like, oh, okay. Of course it still hurts. Like,
right. But the difference is that now you have the vocabulary to articulate it.
Yes.
And you're no longer relying on somebody else to tell you what's going on. You can read the forecast yourself. You can see the signs and say, oh, X, Y, and Z means this is what's going to happen.
Exactly. And, like, in a way, I like laugh, because I'm like, I remember telling human resources this. I'm like, you're letting me go, so be it. But there's no one else that can do this report. It like these things take like weeks and I do it in a day. Yeah, I was making significantly more money, but it's because I contributed so much. Things that would take 3 weeks, I would do it in a day. Killing it, but I would doing it.
Right.
And they're like, don't worry, we have someone in charge. We'll have someone do that. I'm like, all right, dude, like, good luck. Like,
Well, they didn't last long.
you know what? It was funny that report took them 3 weeks. I was told later, like they just couldn't get through it. Like, they're like, how does she do it in a day? And it's been 3 weeks and we still haven't finished it. The person that took over my job, because it's not like my job went away. They just brought someone in that made less money than I did.
That'll just
she ended up with heart palpitations,
all the stress.
The stress of it. And I was like, yeah, I took that all on. Like, yeah, you make money, but you're like, there's a formula. Like, I also contributed. Like,
well, you were hyper specialized. So because of that, you could get through it a lot faster than somebody else.
I could tune out things. I could get it done, but that, I was like, I knew that. I'm sorry that management didn't realize that, like maybe I
eventually did.
Right. I was like, maybe I didn't do a good job in like verbalizing what I did for my job description. But I remember sitting down with management and I'm like, these are the things that I do. This was maybe a month prior. And when my manager wrote it down, it was like 2 or 3 pages. And I'm like, and there's no one to help me. I had just lost my assistant, in the last cut of layoffs. So my boss knew, but these things still have to happen.
So now you are working on your MBA. You're wrapping up your MBA. And it's an executive MBA right here, FIU.
At FIU, yeah. I didn't think I would come back for a degree. But
they're like the Godfather. It's like just when you think you're out, they bring you back in.
It took like 10 years. It's not like I went back to college right away.
You mean after the bachelor's?
After the bachelor's.
Okay.
Like 10 years later.
Okay.
I didn't think I would need a master's, an MBA at that. But while I was at Perry Ellis, I started to make calls to see what other jobs were out there. In case what came to be, I was like, let me just see what's out there. And everyone kept telling me like, oh, but you don't have a master's. Like, how can we pay you your salary when you don't even have a master's?
That's how far you excelled, that you actually needed to level up with credentials because you're...
Right. I was like, I don't understand. Like, this has been my salary. At the time, I think it was like $108,000. It wasn't like a lot of money, but everyone was coming in at like 60 and 80. And I'm like, what? Like,
right.
That's like half of what, like almost half.
Major pay cut.
Right. And I'm like, I don't understand. They're like, you don't even have a master's. You don't have an MBA. And so I'm like, I guess I need this MBA to like level to like.
So that you could be one of the.
Yeah. So like, I was like, so quantify my position, my salary. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'll go. And I thought like, let me just get like a cheap MBA, like I just need an MBA to show it on paper.
Right.
And I went to a fair here at FIU. I was going to go to the one in I-75 for professional.
Well, it's far from cheap. I mean, it's affordable, but it's a high quality program.
But there's different levels, right? I think the lowest one at the time was like 15,000, and the highest MBA was like 60,000. So it's
there's a
difference, right? So I'm like, well, I have the job. I already have the experience. I don't need a high end. But when I went, they explained to me that the executive MBA is for people that had 8 to 10 years of experience, right? So my cohort, the people in my group would be more understanding to my problems. They weren't kids off college, right? Because that was my worry. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to deal with someone that has no work experience. And here they are trying to explain to me how the corporate world is, right? I'm like, I've been there. I have the daggers in my back, like I know how it works. So they explained that to me and they're like, oh, and at the end, like you have a 1 week trip overseas to go to another school. And I was like, it was very interesting. I was like, really? Like, they're like, yeah, you'll deal with people your age, your group. And it's the same group from beginning to end.
That's helpful.
It was so helpful. I didn't think it would mean much, but it really was. I was stuck with, for lack of better, I think it was like 24, 30 of us, for 18 months doing this program. And it really was nice that we all had, I'm here thinking like, I'm the only one that's experiencing this because I'm in the retail industry. But there's someone, that is saying the same thing, and they're in the hospitality industry. And there's someone that's in the healthcare industry thinking the same thing. And you come to find out, oh my God, we're all experiencing the same thing, even though we're in completely different industries, right? We're frustrated. We've reached the ceiling. Everyone's telling us we need to go back to get this degree, even though we're very knowledgeable in what we do.
Right.
Or they're paying for a consulting company to come in and tell them how it is to run the business when they could just literally ask me and I could tell them what's wrong with the business, right? Like, save your money. But we're being overlooked. And so when you come to find out that you have like 30 people that have that same thought and process, you're like, I'm home.
You're not crazy.
Right. I'm not crazy. There's other people very relatable,
Right.
different industries, right? So if anything, it was really interesting to learn about those industries.
Okay. So now you have an MBA. You're moving on to other companies. You make a small pit stop at a few local places. What's the next major place that you go to?
So I started doing consulting for a couple of small businesses here. And then it dawns on me that I can't keep working in retail, right? The system is broken in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can't change it, what can I do?
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that my biggest frustration when I was in retail was that I could never, the company had no problems paying for a new solution, a new software, but I could never get an assistant. I'm like, an assistant is only $30,000. A solution is millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, man, just give me an assistant. And I realized, I'm like, well, if you can't beat them, join them. So let me go into software, right? I am not a coder. I do not know how to write software. But in my heart of hearts, I was like, this has to be a way. I have to be able to get into this industry because I've used enough of this software, right? And I know that all roads lead to Microsoft Excel. So I'm like, there has to be a way.
So as a retail industry expert, you knocked on the door of the technology industry and you said, you need me.
I sent out hundreds over a year. It took me a year and a half, sending out hundreds of emails, resumes, applications, anyone, anything. I was on LinkedIn right when it had just started, I was in LinkedIn trying to find companies. And I remember friends like, oh my God, look at this software out of Italy. I'm like, okay. So I looked at it and I was like, you know what? I have nothing to lose. I sent them an email. I don't know to who, because it just said contact us. I put in my information and I'm like, I think I'd be great. I have a lot of industry experience. Here's my resume. Let me know. And I didn't hear about, you move on. It was one of the hundreds, if not thousands of emails that I sent out. And a completely different company contacted me. And I'm like, I don't think I've ever heard of your company. And they're like, no, we just bought that Italian company. And we're going through all of the stuff, obviously part of the merger. And we see your resume. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, what's up? They're like,
just like that.
Just like that. And they're like, we're looking for someone that has industry experience, right? You've used software before. I'm like, I have used software before. I know how to plan. I know how to buy. And they're like, and we're trying to grow South America. And we see here at the very end of my resume that you speak Spanish. I'm like, I do. I, in fact, do speak Spanish. Never in my 20 years of work experience has that ever been in question. Has anyone ever looked at that?
No one's even cared.
No one's even cared. No one's ever paid me for this. And they're like, so we see you speak Spanish and we see that you're in Miami and we need someone to go to South America.
Go figure.
And it was like, check, right? Travel, check, language, check, solutions, software,
and
right? And check, money. And they're like, oh, and there's bonus features. I'm like, oh my God. It took me 20 years to finally use my bachelor's in international business. It's everything I ever wanted, but it took me 20 years to get here, right? And they're like, we'll train you on the solution. And it was planning solutions, but they also trained me in front end, like a POS, a point of sale, like
Sure.
a cash register. I was like, yeah, I'll learn whatever you want me to learn. Like, That's not a problem. Can you do presentations? I could do presentations. Trust me, I've had to defend numbers all my life, right? Like that is not a problem. I've had to learn it the hard way. I can present for you. Everything that they asked me were soft skills. And I remember telling them like, I just finished my master's. They're like, it's not really required, but it's great that you have one.
They didn't even care.
Because, we feel that the South American customer values education more than here in the States. I'm like,
they care a little.
Yeah. And I'm like, listen, and they're like, well, if anything, that should tell us that you're a jack of all trades. I'm like, I will learn whatever solution you need me to learn. And I did. I learned like 8 different softwares in that 1 year, right? Like I was like, take me wherever you want me. But at the time when I had accepted that job, I had also looked into a doctorate program with FIU.
The DBA.
So it just so happened that both things were happening at the same time.
Okay.
So I had to let my employer know, I'm like, look, I want to work for you guys. I really do. There is this program that I had applied, not thinking you guys existed. It's once a month. It's once a month. Everything else is online. Is it a problem? And they're like, we're software. You have unlimited time off. You work on nights, that's fine.
So this was a good combination for you.
It was a very good combination. They're like, just figure out your travel, the Thursday, the Friday that you need off, just let your manager know. And my manager was super on board and it worked out. It was
Now this is what year?
2018.
You were there with them for a couple of years? I
was there with them through 2020, which is when the pandemic came.
Okay. And what happened then?
And when the pandemic came, all of a sudden, the borders closed.
With the borders closed, there goes Latam.
And there goes Latam. So they're like, we cannot travel to Latam. I'm like, you're right. I don't want to travel to Latam either.
The problem is that your whole job is Latam.
My whole job. Yes, I had customers here in the US, but for the most part, everything was Latam related. That was my appeal, right? Like that was everything about me.
But if they're not going to be going down there,
they were not going to go down there.
They're kind of superfluous at that point.
So the company made the decision that, I'm not saying it happened right away, but like if the pandemic, I think, started in March, by October, they had made the decision, we're going to go ahead and close that region.
Right.
And we're no longer going to need you. So
of course. I mean, that's a logical business.
It's logical. Again, it hurts personally, obviously. I can't tell you like, oh my gosh, it was so logical. Like, I totally agreed. No, like, obviously it hurt me because it was my dream job.
So you were dying a little bit inside.
Yeah, I finally had gotten the dream job, right? Like, I went to school for international business. I was like, everything I worked up was for this. I had that dream job and here it goes. It's gone. And I'm like, and what other job am I getting? I'm not a software developer, like, what do I do? So again, power of LinkedIn and just like emailing everyone I knew that I had met in fairs for software when I would attend the fairs for, promoting my product. I made a point to reach out every time I met someone. I would, link them on LinkedIn. I kept business cards, and the moment that happened, I went crazy, right? Like, and at the same time, as crazy as it was, I was still, I was like closer to my last year of my dissertation. So like, all these emotions are happening. You're trying to land a new job. You're trying to finish a thesis that's worth 80 pages. It's like 80 pages long. And you're looking for a new job, and like all these things are and there's a pandemic. Like the pandemic like is in the backdrop, like, oh, that's right, it's a life-threatening, something that could happen that could affect your family. And yet that to me was like, yeah, okay, just stay indoors, like you'll be fine. And Things of Life, a Canadian company, was looking for my position pretty much, but in the States. Because at the time, Canada couldn't travel in to the States because of the pandemic. They would have to come in and stay 2 weeks, right? And then go back and stay 2 weeks in a hotel. Right. Again, pandemic times. Like right now, it doesn't make sense. But in those times, like they would lose a month to visit a customer. So they're like, we just need someone in North America that can travel domestically to meet with the customer.
That is ironic. You lose Latam because you can't go to Latam, but now you gain America because Canadians can't come.
Exactly. So I'm like, yeah,
that's like, just the way it is.
They're like, oh, you have to learn a new solution. I'm like, okay, like I'm working on a doctorate. Like surely I can learn this. Like they're like, yeah, go ahead, and I did that for like a year and a half until the pandemic, for the most part, subsided.
Now, was this remote work for the most part?
Yeah. It was
Okay.
thankfully remote work. In the year and a half, maybe I traveled once.
Mhm.
So, the company doesn't know that at the time, right?
Mhm.
The company, everyone had the assumption that the pandemic would only last a couple months.
Well, no one knew what we know now.
Right. And everything was just like, well, one more month. Well, one more month turned into like a year and a half.
Mm.
So with that company, I finished my thesis. Thankfully, because I was remote, I was able to do both things at once.
Why did you go for your doctorate?
Sometimes I'm like, why? Like you just said, why? I think at that point, I wanted to finish my education,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I wanted it to be known that I am the expert, right? There's not a lot of doctorates in retail. It's not, anyone will tell you that if a master's is not needed, why a doctorate, right? But I wanted the buck to stop with me.
Okay.
Like I am telling you, based on knowledge, based on personal experience,
as the ultimate
authority, based on personal experience and based on research that I've done, that this is the answer. And I felt that the doctorate would do that as well. Like, and there would be no more education for me. Like I'm like, I'd be done, right? And it just so happened that I never thought it was going to be possible, because prior to the DBA program at FIU, it was a PhD program, which was 5 years long, and it requires you to be full time. That was never in question.
Yeah, full time on campus.
Right. Like I would never leave my job to go back to education.
That's typical.
Right.
It's typical for the.
I've always worked full time. I'm like, no, I'm never going to stop working to go to it, to do something in education.
But
I could lose that position, that industry position. So that wasn't. But when they offered the DBA, they're like, no, you would work full time and you would go to school full time.
It's 2 years plus 1 of the dissertation.
Right. And it's exactly 3 years. And I was like, I mastered time management with my MBA, where I lacked that in my bachelor's. In my bachelor's, I don't know how I did it. It was just very like as it came, right? My MBA, I made it a point that I was like, you can time manage this. And my doctorate, it was like, I've been able to do this for 18 years, 20 years. I surely can do this for 3 more years. So it was just like it was sold to me as, wow, that's really good. It's a really good idea. It's just 3 years. You put your head down, 3 years, and then you'll have the rest of your life to grow this doctorate. You could write more papers if you want. You don't have to go into academia. You could just be an industry expert and you would be fine. You could go back into your workplace. That was attractive to me because I didn't really think of myself as a professor or just being a full-time professor. It just wasn't for me. I really like what I do. So I think that's why I also chose the DBA, the doctorate, right? Like I wanted to be an expert in my industry. And I also wanted to finally identify things that were happening, right, in the workplace. And that doctorate really was able to help me like, I actually know the term for that. Like when things happen, my coworkers, I'm like, this is happening. I'm like, I actually know the term. This is what's going on. Or of course you're not thinking right because, your needs aren't being met and this is what you need to do. So it's nice. It's been nice to have the doctorate as a result of that.
What was the feeling when your family's there watching you and all the other families are there and you're sitting down next to your cohort and commencement?
Oh, okay.
And
I'm like, when?
At the secret mission and they call you up. And now, one by one, they start calling names and Dr. Liria Litano. What was that for you?
Oh,
what was that?
It was bittersweet because, again, pandemic, right? So my graduation was in the football field.
Okay.
It wasn't at the Ocean Bank Convention Center, Convocation Center. So no AC. Really hot. Like,
it's Florida.
You're sweating, but it's super emotional because you're walking through the stage and you're seeing a lot of things you're going through your head. my parents can finally rest, right? You're thinking like, wow. So for me, from being Hispanic, there's my parents can now rest that I have the education. They're finally free. Like all their missions have proven. Yeah. It just felt nice to think of that part, right? There's obviously the success aspect. Like, I'm done. I'll never have to do this again. Right. And then it's like the sacrifices that you've made along the way, the 3 years, what has happened in those 3 years, what has transpired.
You've had a lot of sacrifices.
Yeah. But you know what? They were meaningful. Like they needed to happen so that I could be where I am today. So it's not like, oh my God, the sacrifice cost me something that I'll never get back. No, I think the sacrifices that I made were necessary to be where I am today.
Would you say that you're a better person for the doctorate?
Oh, definitely. Oh, I'm definitely a better person for it. I used to be very passionate about my job, and I still am passionate, but now I can define when I need to stop. Sometimes I'll think like, wow, like I've worked a lot of hours this week. I definitely need I'm going to need a week off, or like I'm going to need some time off, because I know full well, according to the research, that I'm not going to be able to continuously be as productive as I was this 1 week. So I'm more able to explain it to myself like, hey, this can't happen all the time. Whereas before I would just burn myself out.
Right.
I would burn myself out. I'm an introvert. So that was even worse. I was going into the weekends like dead. I didn't want to talk to people. Now I know how far I can take things. So it's really like a learning lesson for yourself. That's how I saw the doctorate.
So you're now more self-aware.
I'm very self-aware about how much I can contribute. I'm more aware of corporate dynamics, what needs to get done. I finished having like an evaluation not too long ago, and my boss is reading it and he's like, did you Google this? Like everything is like answered like hyper technically as if like HR.
Here's a tissue.
Huh? Oh, thanks. Everything is just answered like very formal, and I'm like, is that not what you needed? And he's like, no, it's exactly what we needed. I was just surprised that like I knew how to define exactly what needed to get defined so that I could get the promotion. Like I know exactly what my boss is looking for in me to move to the next level. And I know what management needs to move to the next level.
And now, of course, you're acting in the same capacity where you're doing transformation work, which is what you mentioned at the beginning of our segment. And you're a consultant. You offer your opinions, your advice, your expertise to the company you work with. And how is that relationship, that consulting relationship where you're tasked with evaluating and assessing and giving feedback?
Well, it's the culmination of everything that I've done over 20 years, right? So instead of me being on the bottom, right, being a worker, now it's like I'm part of the chess. I am the person that's playing chess right now with people, and I'm talking to C-level executives, and they're telling me their frustrations, and I'm like, I know exactly what you need. Like I walk into a store and I understand the frustrations, and I understand their frustrations, and I can quantify that frustration. That is going to cost you, right? Like these people being upset is costing you X amount of money. So it's very nice to see the full picture. I wouldn't have been able to see that full picture had I not done my career, right? Had I not worked in the stores, had I not worked in corporate, had I not worked in the wholesale, I wouldn't be able to relate to now dealing with the C-level, who they just see one thing. They don't go to every store all the time, right? Or if they go to the store, they're only seeing one thing, but they're not walking out. The fact that they're coming to me and they're like, I don't know what's wrong. And I'm like, yeah, you're giving me a pain, but you're not showing me the problem. Let me tell you what the problem is. So I love coming in and showing them, explaining to them like, this is what it's costing you. This is what that issue, that problem, that pain is costing you.
Okay.
It's a culmination of everything I've done over my career. So it's awesome.
And your giving of this information isn't just limited to people in the corporate world. You're also an adjunct professor at multiple universities, and you're teaching business courses yourself.
Yeah, things of life. I'm the first to tell you that I never thought I would be a teacher in academia. I never thought I had something to give. And when I was doing my doctorate, someone had mentioned like, why don't you go into teaching? You're really good at explaining things.
Yes.
And I was like, no one wants to know anything about retail. No one wants to know, like, they just don't. There's a solution now in play. Like, nobody cares about what I have to say, And it just so happened that a university was opening up a fashion merchandise program here in South Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And I went ahead and emailed them, and they're like, you know what? We don't even have a course in play. Like, we're still building it. Come on board.
Okay.
I did that. Then because I was doing overseas travel to Litano so much, they needed a professor of international negotiations. So I'm like, well, I've been doing international negotiations for the past 2 years dealing with Litano,
right.
So I could definitely, I think I can teach that. Like, I have the personal experience for it. And so I started doing that. So it's like you never know that experience that you have. You might think, oh my God, it's so not necessary. I'm never going to need this. Like, no one's ever going to value it. And here I am teaching, at 2 universities, things that have happened to me. I teach based on real life. Like, I don't talk to the students too much about the theory behind it. I talk to them about, this is what needs to get done. These are the things that you need. These are the soft skills that you need to accomplish your goals in life.
So looking back at your life, what would you say to that 8-year-old Liria?
No.
You're going to leave the country you were born in, Peru.
Mm-hmm.
Your parents were going to struggle to make sure that you and your sister were cared for.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of sacrifices along the way so that you could get your education, which led to all these experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually the degrees, to the point where now you're a professor.
Yeah.
Apart from the fact that you're a consultant, a retail industry expert, and a functionary as well inside a tech company. What would you say to that young person if they looked at you and said, what can I do to get to where you're at?
Keep dreaming. When I was 8, I don't know why, things of life, I love the name Pennsylvania. I don't know if it was Sesame Street or something. I loved it. And I told my parents, I'm like, I want to visit Pennsylvania. And at the time, it just felt so stupid. Like, we're never going to go to the US, like, okay. And here I am, like 20 something, 30. I think I've been in this country longer than 30 years, but, like, here, everything is possible. So I would tell that girl, like, keep dreaming. Like, don't let anyone tell you that it's not possible, because apparently it is. Everything is possible here in the US. I am the American dream.
What a beautiful way to finish this segment. Dr. Liria Litano, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And I loved everything you had to say. And I am contractually obligated to say that every day.
Thanks.
I love you. Thank you so much for you being you. And till the next time. Thank you.
Breaking barriers takes strength, but the impact it creates can last a lifetime. Be bold, share your story, and pave the way for others to follow. This episode is dedicated to the trailblazers who refuse to let adversity hold them back. I'm Alex Ponce. Join us again for more incredible journeys.